Good evening. So I decided this week to write my discussion board post on Kenneth Minckama's journal article, Reforming Harvard, Cotton Mather on Education at Cambridge. So Mather was a very prolific writer, minister, was linked to the Salem witch trials in some ways, but he was at odds with his alma mater, whom he loved very much, throughout a big part of his life. So in the journal article, we read where Mather wrote what he called inquiries that seemed to approach his major issues with Harvard from a couple different sides. One, he wanted to make sure that the student body was still being trained in spiritual things. He wanted to make sure that the Bible was being taught and that the students were attempting to live by the Word of God. At the same time, he wanted to make sure the college integrated classical studies and a secular curriculum into their ministerial training for students. So originally Harvard was founded to be a school to train ministers, but he wanted to make sure that they were getting a well-rounded education in all of this. But he was very concerned at the liberalizing of the school at this point as well. Part of Mather's issue with Harvard was the election of a president, Leverett, whom he felt was kowtowing to the Church of England, the Anglican Church. Obviously Harvard was founded by the Puritans, and he felt that this new president was basically just a rubber stamp for the Anglicans. He himself wanted to be president of Harvard, but throughout his life he ran into several obstacles that kept him from becoming president. His father, Increase Mather, most famous for the Salem witch trials, didn't support some of the changes that Cotton Mather had proposed at some point, and not necessarily in an overt way, but in a roundabout way. Increase Mather kind of kept him from becoming president of his alma mater. In the journal article, he also talks about his son is getting ready to go to college, and he wants to make sure his son goes to Harvard, even though he's got problems with Harvard. He's at odds with them, but it's his alma mater, and he loves the school, feels it's the best place for his son to go to college. So he writes out a 12-point method for his son and basically says, these are things you need to do every day when you're in college. These are things you need to make part of your life. Read the Bible every day. Do your recitations for your classes every day. Attend to your tutors, etc. And it's interesting in reading that on a note of opinion, that would probably be a very good method for parents and children who are getting ready to go to college to look at even today. One thing that's a question in the original doc that I found interesting was, what would Mather have done and what impact would he have had he ever been president of Harvard? What would Harvard look like today? Would it look more like a liberty? Would it look more like it currently does, or would it be somewhere in the middle? Where would Harvard be? I used 3 sources along with the journal article. The first source is a book by Rick Kennedy called The First American Evangelical, A Short Life of Cotton Mather. And basically he shows a connection between Mather and the Salem witch trials. The connection between Salem witch trials and the Second Great Awakening. It says Mather is that connection. So Mather was the first American evangelical, as we know evangelicals today, according to Kennedy. It's easy to see, though, where Mather would have been ostracized by the more liberal intelligentsia of the day, in spite of the fact that he was probably more intelligent and was a much more prolific writer than any of the people he was at odds with at Harvard and in that institution. The second source I used was Mather's own book called Magnalia Christi Americana, which was a history of New England in the 17th century. He has a chapter in there about the founding of Harvard, and you can see how much he loves Harvard and loves his alma mater by spending so much time writing about it in this vast book that covers a century of New England history. Lastly, I used a source, which was a letter from Mather to the Harvard Corporation, where he thanks them profusely for bestowing his doctorate on him. And again, it shows this love that he had for his alma mater. You can see that if with his education credentials, his affection for his school, and his ministerial background, he would have probably been a great president for Harvard, and they would have done well to heed his suggestions, his warnings, etc.